Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my latest version of my CCSP, and now with CCSK. So I just explained it to the class, but this class should give you both. And I'm testing this material out, and I sure hope you understand and are patient with me as you realize, hey, he didn't finish that slide. I'm constantly trying to keep up with things, and I don't know what's going to be on the exam. No matter what they tell you, we changed these, we added this, and they didn't change much. My favorite thing that they changed, though, is that they seem to have added certificate management. And that is so important. And if anyone's taken my class, they know how, I always say, I don't care how strong your locks are. Do you manage the keys properly? Because if the wrong guy gets the wrong key, you got to manage who first. It's always who. I need to know who you are. So my objective personally, especially when I have a big class like this, I really, really look forward to getting feedback and input from you guys. You guys do this for a living. My wife does this for a living. I mostly talk about the way it's supposed to work. I used to do stuff like that. But your objective, I know, is to pass the exam, and I've been doing certification boot camps for over 2 decades. I understand that. But our overall objective is to get better. You may have noticed, and I've got people. My wife made up a term, wolf blitzing, in my ear all the time. Tell me, did you hear the news? Yes, I saw the news, and there are existential threats. I know. I can see it. I'm not blind to this. But we've got enough people telling us that. What we need is more of the good news, right? Some people say you need about 10 to 1 to process that. That's the way our brains generally have to work. It's an old survival instinct. Your DNA knows it's better to miss a meal than to miss a predator. You miss a meal, you lost out on that rabbit, you could have eaten that, versus you missed out on that tiger, your family's wiped out. So we have to process that faster. But we're actually I'm not just making it up and only, I'm not ignoring bad things. If you really look at data, as bad as some things are, mostly things have gotten better. And we're going to see that and how it's changed the stresses or the needs of information security. When there's not enough to go around, information security is competitive stuff, competition, where the mountain people have to compete with the valley people to get that limited supply of water. They're going to lie to each other. But when there's enough to go around, we just collaborate. You bring the peanut butter, I'll bring the jelly. Someone else will get bread. We'll work together. And information security becomes much more about availability and integrity. Authenticity, and so much has changed in the hacking world. So around PKI, particularly SolarWinds, and my wife likes to point out, my wife's in incident management, by the way. She's much smarter than I am in most things. I can sniff packets, she said, but she puts out that Log4j didn't go away either. So if you're not aware of these hacks, I'm going to tell you, we're in a really vulnerable state right now, but we can fix this. We have the technology. We're going to make it better, and we're going to secure that future of abundance for everybody. It's important. This class is not all you need to pass. I don't even know who you are. I don't know what your background is. You might be able to pass without this class. I don't know. Maybe you've already passed, but I don't ever promise that. I always tell you, read the official guide, or at least glance through it, do the practice exams, and at least one other guide. And I really love this free. I can't think of a better one right now. And I highly recommend practice exams. And CCSK is my default favorite for this, but I would also try at least one other. And then your resources. ISO costs money. That's a shame. That is the Federation. I'm a Star Trek fan. I got my Beatle Star Trek shirt on anyway. But NIST works very closely with ISO, and all those publications are free. And as a packet analyst, anybody who works in packet sniffing knows that if you can't sniff the packet, if I can't prove it to you in a packet, then the next thing I do is I go to there's an RC, it clearly states, So you get those at the Internet Engineering Task Force.org, the IETF. That's where all of our standards come from. This is why I don't go into main order. In any development life cycle, you have these basic steps. Now we're going to go through some wacky, today that's what changes. That's what's changed since the last version of this exam. I mean, if you're in DevOps and DevSecOps, things have gotten crazy, and having PKI certificates for those supplies, for those information containers as a service, whatever, they got all kinds of stuff now. Function as a service. It's not just platform anymore, just in those last few years. But either way, I like to use, and we're going to use all week, going to a restaurant. It's something we've all done, something we've all seen get wrong because the information didn't get somehow communicated properly. And we're going to try, improve communication so everybody gets what they want. So first of all, in any development life cycle, I always say who is the most important part. If anybody, I know we've got some abundance people here. So Dan Sullivan, right? He always talks about ask who, not how. The very first, and if you get that wrong, nothing else in security matters. This is why we need this federated identity management. And there's no easy solution. What we have now is not good enough. Log4j and SolarWinds and others have, my wife told me there was, I didn't even get a chance to catch up because she needed a break. But those of you in incident response might know there was 2 huge vulnerabilities discovered last week, and they're already exploit code. Anyway, who's going to go to the restaurant? When? Where? What restaurant do we go to? And why are we going out for a party? All of these things are the planning step. This is governance. This is when management decides, you know what, I have an idea for the business. These are the top things, But then the hard part. What do you want? What does this person want? Now, for us, this person is probably a data owner. So not senior management or CEO will decide who, what, where, when, why. Senior management is sometimes called executive management. But the actual process owners, the data owners, they're the people who attend the restaurant, right? They're the ones we have to keep. And this is like the manager of HR, the manager of sales. What do they want? This is like a CISSP. And what makes the CCSP different than the CISSP is I always tell my CISSPs, you're basically the architect. If you keep that in mind, you'll probably have the proper focus. The problem with this exam is you could be any one of these people. So you might be a data owner. You might be senior management. You might be an architect. You write down what they want, and people don't always know what they want. The hardest part in any development life cycle to understand is what people want. When waiters misunderstand me, they bring me the wrong food. When Alexa here misunderstands me, she'll say the damnedest things. And that's going to be important in security in my class when I talk about AI security. I don't worry about the Terminator where, my Roomba gets an update overnight and then decides that I have to do the vacuuming from now on. It's going to watch TV. They don't have that type of sentience. At least I'm not convinced yet. Ray Kurzweil might tell me it's coming, and maybe he's right, but I don't see it coming anytime soon. But I do see them getting out of control and making mistakes. Alexa makes a lot of mistakes. I still love you, Alexa, but anyway. All right, so we write down what they want. How? That's the design. Then we have subject matter experts, our developers, our engineers. They develop according to design. They need to know the design, communicated properly, and exactly followed. We're going to talk about verification, making sure that says 256 bits. Why'd you do 128? That's verification, unit testing. But if the hardest part of a development lifecycle to understand is what people want, the hardest thing for people to follow, nobody likes doing the dishes. Nobody likes patching. No, your data custodians, your operations staff, whatever, the only reasons that they do this is because they have families and the band's not taking off. It's not like he loves this job. No one likes changing. If you have a IPsec site-to-site VPN that uses shared secrets, I don't care if it was set up 20 years ago, I doubt you change that passphrase once because it works and nobody likes having to troubleshoot the IPsec tunnel endpoint, right? So we're going to go over these now. Of course, when they bring it out, that the Cook test, is this what you want? It's and that's an important test. We're going to go over a lot of testing here, a lot of application. Let me just look at the order and make sure you got my order right. Like a static code test. But then bring the food out and make sure, hey, yeah, you got all the food ordered right. Everything was cooked perfectly. But why'd you bring me my dessert first? There's a lot of orchestration stuff besides getting the modules technically right. But when they bring it out, and this is one of the problems we have with, like, say, 5G phones. If those of you in the abundance group might have seen me once in a while comment back and forth on we have a 5G enthusiast there, and he's right. It brings so much great stuff. A lot of people are 5G enthusiasts. The problem is 5G. One problem is how do I know who is not me using the phone? Is that really my ISP I'm connecting to? And to make it faster to deploy, even though 5G supports PKI certificates, EAP TLS, we'll get there later. But whatever the case is, it's hard to deploy. So they didn't deploy it. So 5G is still very vulnerable to connecting to what you think is your cell tower or whatever, or your provider, and you're really connecting to a man in the middle. They're called stingrays. They're very easy to set up. Whatever the case is. Anyway, we'll go through all this fun stuff. So I like to follow a development life cycle to pass an exam. Who? You guys. What are we doing? Passing the CCSP and now CCSK. I'm always in the process of designing how to get you that, and we're in class, we're going to follow it, and you'll test it, you'll take your test, and hopefully you'll get your thing, and everybody's happy. All right. Hey, what happened? There we go. All right, so our schedule loosely now, and I've renamed chapters. So again, this is Introduction to Cloud Computing, what I'm doing right now. And then we're going to look at overall risk management in general, and what you do when you have to architect a solution. So one of my favorite examples of risk versus architecture vulnerabilities, my television is very vulnerable to the threat of water. But my television and most televisions are not made to be waterproof or water resistant because we considered the environment, the operating environment. Right? It's going to be used inside, very perimeterized, whatever. It's going to be protected from external threats. So rather than prevent that problem, we just have since it's a high impact, but very low likelihood, we'll just have some disaster recovery plan for that or whatever. So this is what we need to do. When we architect solutions, you never want to waste money. I don't want to waste time, right? Making my television waterproof would be a huge waste in most cases. We're just trying to complete the mission. I want to watch TV. Yesterday, all I wanted to do was watch an old Doris Day movie, and I'm like the only one in my family who likes Doris Day or any old movies. I've come up with a new thing, Martine. If the guy isn't wearing a hat, I don't want to watch that movie. That's how you know all my movies I want to watch are mostly from pre-1960. And then shows me there's a new cowboy thing. And it doesn't, but anyway, that's not what I care. All right, so we're going to go through that. And then we're going to get more into encryption and PKI. This is the certificate management that I said is new for this thing, at least on their thing. And I find it very, very important. And just cut to the chase. Our certificate system, the way IDs work, the reason this is Zoom, the reason that the website is where it is because of their certificate, because of their X.509, basically a license that validates that when you said whatever iscsquare.org, they have a license or certificate that says, no, that's proof. You can see it. You see my name, you can check my face. It's not the face, it's a DNS, it's your domain name. So that problem is at the root of it. Who gives out these certificates? These are at the very high level. We're going to see it later, but they're certificate authorities. And unfortunately, in this hierarchical setup, if any one of them is wrong, You can't trust the entire system. This is not the way Bitcoin works, right? When we get into this and we realize, no, in a good consensus protocol, you'd have to get, I mean, it's not perfect, but you'd have to get more than 50% of the whatever CAs, validators, miners to be wrong. So somehow over the next few years, we're going to have to do something. In fact, Bruce Schneier said when SolarWinds happened, that was more than a year ago, that broke everything. And we really need to burn the network and start all over again. And you don't want to scare people. There's enough bad news out there, and it's not bad. It's an opportunity to build it right. I don't know what the right answer is. I'll suggest to you this week. I think a quick patch would be to blockchain the CAs, but we'll see how that works, and we can debate it and come up with a better one. The day 3, a lot of questions on their exam too, and the difference between the CCSP and the CCSK for me is that the CCSP did get drilled down a little bit more into each subject. So they get a little deeper, or a wider, I should say, even on testing and the types of static application versus dynamic application, positive versus negative testing, regression testing, and stuff like that. Though with DevOps, and one of my favorite DevOps person, she published that. I saw her interviewed and Michelle Chuberka, and I saw her interviewed recently, and she said there's 2 things. That one, don't call it DevOps, and 2, don't even start with DevSecOps. And she and I and another also big fans of an engineer from Amazon who Kevin. But Kevin says, no, that's all we call it at AWS is DevSecOps. What's in a name? I don't know the right answer to a question. So we'll try to get the names, but don't get too caught up in it. All right, so in this one, day 4 and day 5 are just going to do some practice exams, and we'll start with C Secure, and I'll be working on my own. The exam for the CCSP is 3 hours, 125 questions. You have 25 beta. They're not marked. I always say, just try to get them all right. And they have not announced any change to this. This is still in August. The format is going to be. The CCSK, 90 minutes. This is done online. It's wonderful. Oh, it didn't take my change. It's not, the testing center is not View. No, I'm sorry. The testing center is online. You at home. All right, but what did I really do to make things different? What's new to the world to me? I just told you, Federated Identity Management. This is the Federation of Star Trek. Only we don't call them the Federation. We call them the ISA. It's the ISA, right? But they're the Federation. And PKI, the public key infrastructure, just associate with that first hardest step of any development lifecycle. How do I know it's really you? How do I know it's you? I could tell because I saw you before. You know, my eyes are biometric, but online, how do I know it's you? Passwords, right? When you come up with an authentication system for your company, username and password on my Wi-Fi, that's fine, but it's not federated. I can't take that, school ID and go to the airport with it. No, I'll need to see a driver's license or a passport because they're federated. And we'll talk more about that. And that's your private public key pair. We'll create them. We'll talk about why the world's where it is. A lot of privacy laws on the existing CCSP. Lots of GDPR. I don't know where they're going to go beyond that, but there's a lot of laws rolling out just like that. Privacy and data laws are great things. We're going to look at the issues where your privacy is being compromised, and people, your privacy's dead. No, it can't die. No, because if it does, PKI doesn't work. Blockchain fails. You like your Bitcoin? Then privacy can't die. You can't have it both ways. It changes, and we'll talk about this. And we'll talk about a lot of it's just respect, There are regulations like PCI, which won't land you in jail, but a number of questions on it you will need to know, at least up to this point, the 4 levels and how they work out, and various guidelines. And we're going to go through a bunch of them there. My favorite, again, free sources NIST 853 is their catalog of controls. a year and a half ago or so, they updated that and added data privacy as its own and supply chain management. And that goes back to the SolarWinds problem, where those containers or services or certificate authorities aren't who you thought they were. You get that wrong, it doesn't really matter. And supply chain management is part of artificial intelligence as a service now. So when the last exam came out, it was a cool thing to talk about. But now there are things you have to purchase. You can purchase at Microsoft, right? They have cognitive services and machine learning as a service, and this just keeps growing. And Web 3.0 now, the metaverses, whatever they want to call them, but. This is when we use our blockchain to get better data integrity. And COVID did a lot of things for me that I like. I like not having to leave my house. I don't like that there are certain parts of the conversation that are missing. There's certain dynamics. I can't see the look on your face, There are some things added to this that augments reality, though. This is an augmented reality. In real reality, do you think I could look at a list constantly of your names? When someone talks, I see a mic show up with their name next to it, so I never go, wait a minute, who are you talking again? It'll show right up. That's cool. I'm looking forward to putting on my Apple Glass or whoever, and I see you guys. I still see the room, and I don't want it to. I buy every version of Oculus headgear as it comes out, and I wear them for the first 3 or 4 days, trying them out. That's about it. No, I want something that I keep on all the time. I want a virtual club where I have a jazz club, and I call it the Container Club. But quick, my wife just pointed something out. If you guys aren't aware, TCP might be going away. Its days are numbered. It is quickly being migrated to UDP-based quicker format. I don't know if there's questions on this. Again, the test hasn't come out yet. I won't know till August. But if I were the ISC Square, I would definitely have 1 or 2 questions on quick. It was approved by the IETF, by the Internet Task Force last May, and it is much, much faster. And I knew that Google and YouTube have been using it for years, but my wife just pointed out the new vulnerability from Microsoft. Oh, we'll search it later. She looked at me because I told her about Quick. She goes, guess who's not vulnerable? Azure. You know why? Because they're using Quick. And I thought, she almost looked like she was proud of me. She's usually mad at me. She's usually like, who left this out? But this time it was the other look that I like so much. Anyway, and if you're not aware, NIST has another series that started in 2017, not the 800, which you hopefully, if you're in this field, if you're a test taker, you need to know the 800 series. There's just, you can't be in the information security business without it. But the 1800 series, and using PKI and federated identity management, DNS can be, well, at least signed. DNSSEC gives me a sign, and there's always been DNSSEC questions on the CCSP. So that's already been there. DNS can sign the reply. And then so when I say whatever, send this email to bob@nist.gov, first the DNS server has to tell me where that is. If that's wrong, then it doesn't matter, right? Who? So DNSSEC makes sure that, no, I'm authoritative, and it digitally signs the reply. It's not encrypted. Nobody cares. That's not a secret thing. It's just, it's authentic. It's integrity, right? So yes, that really is the IP address for NIST.gov. Okay. And then I didn't even put it in there, TLS, to make sure that the mail servers are can encrypt the data between each other. We're not doing SMTP over 25. Hopefully you're not going to pass any requirements. So you're doing it over TLS. And now that, and they know that they're talking to who they think they are because they have certificates for each other. But here's the part that I say, talk about deployment. My guesstimate is about, after 30 plus years, we're probably about 2% deployed in SMIME for email. If you have SMIME, you're probably in the US military, in my experience. There's already, I'm going to guess, 80–90% likelihood you work for the US Department of Defense if you have SMIME, even though we're all supposed to have it. We were supposed to have this in the 90s. SMIME's an old standard. But then I got to create a key pair for everybody. It's a pain in the ass. For the same reason people lose Bitcoins. we're talking about it. And S-MIME 4.0 has been out since 2019, and I can't even get anybody to sell me 3 years later an S-MIME signed certificate. I'll talk more about that. Not 4.0 anyway. Oh, I see a chat here. Hi, Larry. Will this class go all 14? I believe it will. I believe we'll go. Yeah, it's my goal. It depends on your context. But yeah, I sure hope so. But what do I always promise? I'm not going to cover everything. I'm not the guy that claims this is all you need to know. Again, I don't even know who you are. This is what I'm talking about in information security when we're competing versus collaborating. Now, competition is normal. I don't expect that we're ever going to stop competition. In fact, one of my favorite societies, I've become a history buff, is the Minoan Society in Crete. Almost 3,000 years, they were like egalitarian. Women had equal rights as men, as far as we can tell. There was no like king that could just kill you or whatever like that. They didn't have, but they had a lot of competition, friendly competition over a bull. And then it got nasty, though. It got really bad. They did start competing to the way they think there's signs of cannibalism. It's not that they were evil. They think that what happened was there was a climate disaster, a big volcano that just ruined everything, and now there was no sun, and all the food was going away, and yeah, so that's what happens. But when there's enough food to go around, you collaborate. There's a great book I finished recently called The Dawn of Everything. The Dawn of Everything. And they talk about societies like the Minoans in Crete and the Hopewell Indians in Native America, where they always competed, but it was friendly competition. It got bloody later. And when bloody competition, it changes the game, But so friendly competition is great. I'm not saying that should ever go away. I don't mind the Eagles playing Dallas. I don't want to hate people from Dallas. But when there's enough to go around, integrity and availability. Now, both confidentiality and integrity are dealt with crypto. That's the point of crypto. Crypto is not just, cryptic comes from the Greek. It means to hide. It's not just to hide stuff, though. No, we don't just hide things with it. We also can digitally sign things, and that's how you know it really is Microsoft or PKI certificates, whatever. We do this with crypto. This class is about maintaining availability. So many people will say, you put your stuff in the cloud. I don't trust the cloud. You don't know where your data is. There's a lot of questions about that. There's a lot of questions about the location of the data. Encrypted. I don't use the cloud for confidentiality. I assume I'm making it available. If anything, that would make it available to a bunch of people, even people who it shouldn't be available to. No, the point about cloud is strictly to make it available, and then if you need it to be confidential, if that's a requirement, then the weather, for instance, is not required to be confidential. That would suck, right? No, I want the weather to be available, and I want it to be accurate. There's a very testable concept on the cloud in the exam. Not all data should be shared, but not all sharing presents a vulnerability. No, sometimes it's supposed to be shared. There's another problem when you compete. If I want to know, for instance, if this is in tune, I don't need your opinion. It's a very quantitative thing. If the string is not vibrating at 440 hertz, the answer is no. But if I wanted to, hey, is that a pretty guitar? That depends on your opinion. It's now a good time to play. I'd need your opinion. When it's only one person's opinion, one certificate authority or a king, then they're very vulnerable to bias. And we're going to beat that up a bit this week. My mother, I don't know if but my mother shouldn't get personal. My mother was a woman, and no, it's true. And she was very brilliant, and she pointed out when I was very young that there's bias in society. That she worked with people who made, I think at that time in the 70s, 60s, she made 78 cents on the dollar for the same work because she was a woman, and it didn't make sense to her. And she said, even history is just his. Where's hers? These are bias problems. Right? And with every king, they tend to, a new government, they tend to wipe out any evidence of any crime we committed to get here. Becomes very biased. But today, no, we want accuracy. And when you get more opinions, and that's a very basic mantra of any AI. Life begins at a billion samples. I love that concept. Peter Diamandis, this is the guy who founded Abundance Digital. He's having his A360 meeting at the end of this week. And I love his books. And he's so right. If you look at the data, the future is better than you think. The news is there. It's very biased. You know why CNN or whatever shows the stories they do? To get the bad news going, because the bad news will get your brain. Again, you don't want to miss a meal. Right? I mean, you'd rather miss a meal than death. You could be killed. Coming up next, breaking news, you could be killed. It's wolf blitzing is what my wife calls it, right? But that's not the news. We're going to see that the news actually started in shipping to let us know the weather, because that's really hard. And the news is very biased. If you get more, you look at bigger samples of news, you're like, oh my gosh, life has never been so good. So this, to me, was the way to fix any bias error. Buckminster Fuller, a great hero of mine, American scientist, just felt that when a scientist develops and leaves behind some artifacts, these artifacts should advantage everyone without disadvantaging anyone. And my wife, she's from Taiwan. She made a comment about the Brits. We were watching something about colonialism. She goes, "Isn't it funny how just a couple of years ago I admired the Brits, and now I'm like, oh, you best." So I don't want to pick on the past. We're going to learn and nobody messed up the world more than I did. I'm sure I'm pretty bad too. So we're just going to get better. The Federation. Yep. There's a number of test questions. There's probably at least a dozen questions, just knowing which 27001 versus 2 versus 17 versus 34. They're the basic ones we're going to worry about. But it's not an acronym. It's a word that says we got to treat each other unbiased. There's a reason for this. Right? We realize this. It's the way to go. AI is a new fire. Your data is constantly being mined. We're going to look very closely at how that works and why I think you should be paid for it. If you were to drill underneath my house and start taking out some gas and mineral, I might have to check the deed. Wait a minute. It turns out we didn't purchase that when we bought the house. I don't actually own it. Maybe. But when I go to CNN or wherever and they start selling my data to 50 other websites, and we're going to see that that's true, I will quantitatively show you that they are selling it, or I'll show you that they share it. I'm going to guess that they don't do it for free. That's not gas and mineral that I may have sold. That's my data. That's got to be mine. So, we're talking about whatever an abundance and AI is going to take over jobs, and what are people going to do for a living? Well, we can give them universal basic income. I don't want welfare. That's not welfare. If everybody who sold your data gave you 51 cents on the dollar for the data they sold, I got a feeling nobody would have to work, because you're like, well, someone's got to work somewhere. No, the robots are going to do all the ugly work. All the 3D is dirty, dangerous, and dull will mostly be done by robots. And we are living in a time where we're just about to go from deceptive to disruptive. This is amazing. Now, when we talk about losing control of AI, so our job here this week is to put in information controls. Controls basically add friction. That's a concept we want to keep in our mind, to prevent, hopefully, hitting cliffs. That's exactly what risk is. Cliffs underwater. It comes from the Greek. Or detect and respond. I couldn't prevent it. The wind blew me into it, but at least we had a guy on the lookup, and we got lifeboats, and we have evacuation procedure. We made it. But AI, by 2029, according to Ray Kurzweil, goes out of control, because it will be generally as smart as a human. And once something's as smart, guess what it does next? It gets smarter, and we lose control. This is like a car where you don't have brakes or a steering wheel. Now, this is why the Terminator, oh no, they're going to want to kill us because they're out of control. You don't have to wait till 2029 to see it. There is a specialized AI, and right now we have specialized AI or narrow AI. It could just do one thing, basically. It can play chess. It might not be able to play checkers. Anybody old enough to remember Conficker? That was a botnet in the 2005, 2006, took advantage of a Windows vulnerability that had been patched earlier, like 8 months earlier, whatever the case is. That sucker got out of control. I don't know that it seems to have fessed up to what it was supposed to do, but whoever released it, I think, lost control of that sucker. That's a lesson. Again, also Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is the head of AI at Google. You may have heard of them. As a musician, you may have known many, many years ago. He did the Kurzweil keyboard, first digital piano. But in every case, he predicts by 2045 it will be smarter. This isn't one AI that Vladimir Putin tells what to do. First of all, if you're worried about evil guys, they lose control too. It's like, yeah, but what if an evil guy does it? No, everyone loses control. They're on their own. They're on their own. That genie goes out of the bottle. But what we need to do is get back to advantage all and not disadvantage any. If we get that, we teach you to be humane. That's why I want to use AI to help with animals. Right? I'm smarter than my cat. I don't try to kill it. I love that cat. In fact, I get upset when it scratches its neck because it's got these sores. I'm like, Alfred, my neck hurts when he does it. All right, we're not going to do too much of this. Tom will be with us. I know at least one person knows who Tom is. Tom is a master CEH when they started that program where they're competing with the offensive security, but they got a lab, and he was number 7 out of 1,000, the first 1,000 years. But Tom is a 9th degree black belt. He's been my martial arts coach for over 40 years, and he's going to be with us on Thursday. He does some incredible. He's the guy who introduced cloud to me. He was the editor of the first CCSP study guide, so very appropriate as cloud. But he does bounty hunting for cryptocurrencies and stuff. It's just amazing. It's 74 and he's still whooping my butt on the mat too. And that's our coach, Joe Lewis, who passed away. And Joe Lewis and Tom always taught me to not try to be a master or rule slaves. No, we're just coaches. So you'll meet him here. Joe also said, he goes, why do you think I started Joe Lewis style? Because I agreed with Bruce Lee. That styles limit you. And Bruce and I worked out together, and Bruce created Jeet Kune Do, and then he died. If I followed Bruce Lee, wouldn't I be missing the point? So I created Joe Lewis style. And when I'm gone, don't go teaching Joe Lewis style. You'll miss the point. He wants us to create our own style. And on our black belt, he also had some issues with bias. And I know I have people from all over the world here. I thank you so much. And I hope you feel that what Joe asks us to always do, not permit considerations of race, religion, national origin, or social standing to influence in any way my relations with my students, right? We're going to get rid of that bias. That's the enemy. This is my first computer. I've been doing it for a while. And Tom up the Grove, and that's he was the first guy with a computer, and then I went and got the Commodore, and we'd start trading stuff. And it's like, dude, this is too slow. I'll just drive over to your house and copy it. 300 baud modem. Yeah. And I've been passing exams for a long time. This is my 1988 IBM Advanced Connectivity. In the old days, IBM could only connect IBM. DEC connected to DEC, but now the ISO has created the open system interconnect model. IBM can connect to Novell. Yeah. And it was the 7-layer OSI model that was introduced to me. And we were taught, it's going to replace the government's TCP/IP. If you're doing TCP/IP, you get an idea, but that's going to go away. Yeah, TCP/IP, they told us, was going away. Certified hacker in 2002, and this is actually my first hacking class, and this is now the CrowdStrike guys. And I said in a previous class that it was somebody else counterpaid. I meant to say CrowdStrike, but yeah, and my wife works with every day. Her favorite tool actually is her CrowdStrike. Now, if you're familiar with Moore's law, you may have heard that it's going to run out or run. Moore's law says that that information doubling happens every 18 months or so. This is Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel. And that's held true, but the idea is based on how thick can you make a conductor? And you can't make a conductor less than 1 atom thick. So we knew at some point we're going to run into errors. We figured by 2019, as far as I know, they're still pushing the envelope further than we thought. But at some point, there's going to be something else. Ray points out that's not the first time we experienced that doubling. So, and he calls it, that's the fifth wave and something, or fifth paradigm. We're going to come up with something. And he doesn't think it's quantum, by the way. And I know the ISC Square asks about quantum computing, and we're going to talk about some quantum and know the difference between quantum computing, which is in theory, hopefully, if they ever fix errors, I'm not holding my breath, and quantum computing or quantum encryption, which is out. That runs. It's been out for 4 years. That's different, So don't confuse quantum computing. This theory, it's going to be awesome. It's not out yet. I'm not even wait 10 years. That's one thing I know Peter's going to talk about this week. He's going to introduce some. He's been such a huge fan of quantum computing. Ray Kurzweil, his good friend, co-founder of Singularity University, does not believe it. He's more into like multi-core technology or 3D computing, he calls it. But this book changed a lot for people. Nick Bostrom's Superintelligence, and this is where he points out, you can see Bill Gates, I highly recommend. This is the one that scared Elon Musk and everybody, had everyone talking about it, New York Times bestseller. And he's talked about that we will lose control. And when we lose control, it's going to do stuff that we can't control, and it might be malicious. And I don't think that's a real risk. But it could definitely be a misunderstanding, especially if it's enforcing a policy that was heavily biased toward men and not women, or whatever the bias is. Western Hemisphere versus Eastern Hemisphere, mountain people versus valley people. Now, remember, if a waiter misunderstands me, they bring me the wrong food. But Alexa says the darndest things. These could be, oh, did you say medium rare? I thought you said release toxic fumes into the environment. You're missing a comma. The difference between global disaster and AI might just be you forgot a comma. It's a syntax error more likely than anything else. I don't think it's going to be intentional. I actually had that conversation in email with Morgan, the guy behind Future Scope for any Peter guys. Yeah, Stephen Hawking, a relatively smart guy. He was worried about the intentional threat. I'm a smart guy. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm not worried about it. Elon's kind of where, I don't have to tell you about Elon. He's always saying something. But I believe he's right, not from an intentional threat, but an accident. What's the difference? And one of the best countermeasures. Oh my gosh. One of the problems in Nick Bostrom's book, he says, what words do you use to tell the AI exactly what you want? Because sometimes the literal meaning doesn't have the context that a human would understand. And Rana Kayubi points out what we all realize. Most of our context is in the look on our face anyway. If Alexa could see the look on my face, she wouldn't make anywhere near the number of mistakes that she does. I love this. I want they've got cameras everywhere. So I've got this. I actually wrote her. She said, I'm on the right track. I want to start a little animal reserve, cats and dogs or something. And I'm going to put cameras everywhere. And I wanted to help us maintain the animal's health by looking at the cat's face. These things know if your cat, you can tell by looking at your dog's face what he's feeling. So pretty cool. Also, I'm very fortunate to have a very smart, I told you, my mother, and she was very well read. She'd tell you the Greek origin of any word. She could tell you the Latin, and then she went to Catholic school. I have a Jewish father, who we found out, by the way, during the Russian invasion. My father's parents, according to Ancestry, someone hacked Ancestry, is from Ukraine. I might be related to Zelensky, though his nose does not look like my family. He does not have the Greenblatt nose. But my mother, Irish Catholic, said, I thought everything came from the Latin. They stole it from the Greeks, Larry. In information security, you want to know the things you know, right? You know the things you don't know. They tell you, oh, well, it's the things you didn't know that you didn't know. But what about the things you thought you knew turned out to be wrong? It's so hard to get to. For me, I constantly, oh yeah, that's right. I make these mistakes over and over again. How many times are you going to do that, Larry? Says my wife. You know, but that's how attacks work as a martial artist. You know why I went like that? Because I wanted you to think I was coming that way. I'm coming this way. That was a Joe Louis thing. Joe Louis always said, I don't care how big and strong you are. If I can get you to think I'm coming left and I'm coming right, doesn't really matter. He was an information guy. Yeah. Got to know yourself, got to know the enemy, and you can make the enemy think he knows. It turns out he was wrong. These words that we deal with, one of the hardest parts about getting a solution right, the waiter understanding the customer, is the customer might use different words. When they started insurance and banking, the first companies on the stock exchange, Lloyd's of London is still around today. They now insure spaceships, but they created terminology so we can get on the same page. They created standards. The reason my Wireshark starts at Universal Time Code, which is like, you know, the update of Greenwich Mean Time, was so these ships could all be on the same page. According to our calculations, you should arrive about 3 o'clock your time. And these terms, cyber comes from the Greek. It means to steer or to govern. And risk are the cliffs under the dangers you can't see. They're the cliffs underwater. Now, suppose there was a cliff here and you realized it, right? You found out the hard way. You know how you make sure you learn from history. You got to write it down. You got to make the story. In order to govern, you better be able to read and write. You write down what you learned and then you read it so you don't have to relearn it. You read a map and you go, oh yeah, don't go that way. Go this way. And you go this way, and then suddenly you hit it and you go, boss, this is going to sound crazy. We've gone through this a few times. Sometimes we hit it and sometimes we don't. And then we go, the moon. Now, I don't know how the moon got anything to do with it, but when the moon is full, we don't hit the cliffs. And that's true. And we understand because the moon affects the gravity. We understood that since maybe the last couple hundred years, but we've been shipping for thousands of years. These guys had to come in. Now, I can't explain why. I'm just telling you, it's a moon guide, whatever it is, non-obvious relationship assessment, predictable patterns. All right, so let's make sure we do it during a full moon. And yet the wind comes and blows you right into, don't go that way, the weather. Risk management to avoid the cliffs meant reading, writing, non-obvious relationship assessment, and maintaining up-to-date, accurate weather reports. That's why you have to constantly monitor, continuous monitoring. The guy who drives the car, he can't take his eyes off the road, right? Oh, yeah. And a lot of this stuff started because of the drug trade. This is a really cool history. But Catherine Braganza of Spain, Portugal. First of all, the Portuguese invented this thing, and that changed everything. We've been shipping for thousands of years local routes, you know. But when they invented that, it doesn't matter where the wind is, we can sail. Now we have global, the first world maps. We didn't even have a map of the world. We didn't know the world was round till the Portuguese invented that thing, right? You know, not. But in any case, you take your test, and Lloyd's will make sure that your Prometric is the validator. The IAC square is the certifier, and whether or not you get a job, that's accreditor, right? Yeah, actually, the ISA will accredit you. They did that for these ships. Catherine Braganza is the woman who discovered mixing sugar, which the ships were getting from the Americas, and tea, which they were getting from China, went really well together. No one had sugar with tea before this. It's sort of complete opposite sides of the planet. Apparently that went viral in like weeks. Her husband was King Charles of England, and it just went everywhere. Oh, you're not drinking sugar and tea? Most Europeans just had beer up until this. This is their caffeine. They're going crazy on their caffeine. And Lloyd starts an insurance company, a bank. The news feed. This news feed was one of the first to incorporate the internet. When I say like in the 1800s, when it was over a telegraph machine. And then when you had local area networks, the U.S. and England, but then they the intercontinental, underwater, and now you get New York, and now you get the first world wide area network. As all Lloyd's pushing that, sure, that led to the money for that. And then radio comes out. Think of shipping. You leave, and it's weeks to get over there, and there's a weather report. You don't get it. Even if London's connected to New York, it's too late. You left it. But then Marconi patents the radio in 1909. 2.5 years later, the Titanic goes out. You may have heard of it. Had a little problem. 1,500 people died. 700 people lived. You know why those 700 people lived that never would have lived if that had happened a year earlier? Because the Titanic carried a radio. Now, there were issues. They could have handled the radio better, and they did require that later on. But because of that radio, Lloyd's of London, they said, we got to start doing it. And then from then on, every ship had to carry a radio. And they had to standardize on the presentation layer code, Morse code. Everyone's got to do Morse code from now on. Yeah. All starts with shipping. We're going to be shipping packets. We're going to be shipping data. Oops. All right, so we're going to see these ISO standards. They're all very testable, but we're going to beat them up more later. And my little mouse thing is just bothering me here. All right, so the triple constraints, this is the overall goal. Keep in mind, you're here to support the business. You're not to make strong ships. The reason you have a ship is to say get tea from China and bring it back to England. So you sail over, and they're going to pay you. How much is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? Do you have a free option? Is there any free ones? My wife's always looking for free. No, I don't want to wait that long. What? Do you have anything instant? 30 minutes or less? Whenever governance says we have a goal, we want to get tea from China, they want to do it without wasting any time or money. Whenever you take a test, you might see two answers that solve the problem, but the one that took less time or less money was the one that probably right. We'll beat this up a lot, but keep that in mind. Security is to protect the people. These early ships, when they would take off, they're, like I told you, the very first company on the stock exchange was the Dutch East India Tea Company. And it's supposedly that had something like 100 ships took off for the first mission, and 30 of them made it back. People were dispensable. They were expendable. We saw our SDLC. We're going to see this every day. Every day I'm going to drill it into your head. But it's hard to get the customer's order right. If either they read it wrong, they read the menu wrong, or it's hard for you to get a test question right when that said which is not one of the following, or which process below and you selected a metric. The best thing a waiter can do to ensure they get the customer's order right is to double check with them. Did I get your order right? The best thing a test taker can do to ensure they got their question right. Reread the question and reread the answers. And this is my mother's taxonomy again. Now, if this says shirts in there and there's shirts in there, then I had information about it. If this one's private and it's locked, I don't know what's in there, but I know something's in there. If there's a hidden panel in the back, I didn't even know that was there. But much worse is my missing shirt is in my pants drawer, and I didn't even bother looking there. False information is the biggest problem. This is what gets us. This is why people click on that phony link. Attackers don't just come in, here, click on my virus. No, you clicked on it because it said it was your bank. But one of the hardest things in governance is where will you go? And I am very optimistic. And you notice that the drawings I use here are all drawn by these NASA engineers, Don Davis and Rick Gaitis. I was a big fan of a book that introduced these when I was 20 years old by Gerard O'Neill in the book High Frontier. And I didn't realize it while I was reading this book and daydreaming about these moving to these places. In his class was a gentleman, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos wants to build these. So now I am constant. You want to get in with the receptionist, the boss's secretary, and that's how you do it. I've got Alexas in every room. I got her on my wrist. I want Alexa to put in a good word for Jeff. So, oh, you should check out Larry. He does a lot about this. No, he's a big fan of these things. When you take your test, let Spock take a test first. Spock, if you're not familiar, is a very quantitative person. Vulcan. He'll just add up the numbers. He could tell you if this is in tune. He could tell you how many strings are on it. It's definitely 6. On that object, he's very certain because he can measure it. You can't measure everything. Is it a good song? Or maybe he's never been to this planet. What do you call that instrument? Never see one, Captain. How is it supposed to be tuned? Is that that takes, so first rule out that no, that's the wrong answer, because I know that whatever symmetric is faster than asymmetric. You do your best to prove that's not that. Then you're left over with maybe, hopefully, 1, but he might be left with 2, and you just got, I don't know. Use my hunch. Seems to me, whenever the user's name is Mary, the answer is C. I don't know. Don't start with that. But Larry, they were both right. Larry drives a vehicle. Larry drives a Honda CRV. They're both accurate. Larry drives a Honda CRV DX. Wow, that's even more precise, but it's not true. I don't drive a DX. I drive a vehicle, and that vehicle is a Honda CRV, and that's more precise. Again, Spock could say, it's not that one. Then the Kirk would say, that's a little bit more precise. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. They're both right. I had a number of questions like that on my CCSK, by the way. I said they're both right, but I did a quick Google, and right verbatim out of that study guide is the exact phrase they did for that test, the CCSK. So they want you to be familiar. They want you to be able to at least know where to look, which is very fair, you know. Now, exams are often reading comprehension tests. You have to understand the meaning of that word, right? You have to understand the context of this. And this is where this class is a little different versus people who have taken the CISSP. Again, in the CISSP, you just assume the context is you're the advisor, you're a security manager, you know, you're an architect, whatever. You're not the user, you're not the whatever the firewall admin, you're not the custodians, but here you could be. It's a little more, but semantics, the semantics of business vocabulary, business rules, and you could Google it here, or just look it up on Wikipedia, but I got to meet the guy who created that. My wife actually sat on an airplane next to him and said, oh, you got to meet my husband. This is about 15 years ago, but he was the head of security at Unisys, and he developed this thing for the ISO, for the common criteria for the 15408, very testable, to make sure that requirements are a little bit more precise. So he used a sentence, if I asked you to bring me a picture of a dog tied to a fence, you might think, did he say, take a picture of a dog and tie that to a fence? Or no, tie a dog to a fence and take a picture, because a picture of a dog tied to a fence can be interpreted 2 different ways. But I'd say a human is very likely to figure it out. It's Alexa that has a 50-50 shot of getting that right. That goes back to Nick Bostrom's things about words. All right, so that's our intro. We're going to take a break here. Let me pause the recording.